What I wanted to talk about this morning was an issue that we often seem to face in philosophy of religion, which is that we spend, and often students have to spend because they're studying it, huge amount of time studying arguments for and against the existence of God. And at times it feels like the entire curriculum is based around, should there be an ontological argument for the existence of God based on God's meaning, that on which nobody can be thought, or a teleological argument for the existence of God driven from some notion of design and purpose, and maybe even from looking at the natural world and making conclusions or drawing conclusions from that. Or all the things that I'm sure some of you have studied to do with Aquinas and first cause and claims that they're drawn from Aristotle, which may or may not be sustainable. But I wanted to suggest in this very short video that the whole business of trying to prove that God exists is pointless and maybe even futile. But I think recent events have made this worse. And it seems like since Richard Dawkins wrote The God Delusion, the talk in both the virtual online world and also in debates that we see endlessly on the web and elsewhere on TV has been dominated by what I describe in some recent writing as two ever more shouty choruses. Gathered on one side we have the atheists, and across a chasm of mutual, willful, and sometimes, I think really kind of intentional misapprehension from them, are gathered the hosts, if that's the right word, of theism's defenders. So we have those who argue using these arguments against the existence of God, or argue that these arguments are unsuccessful and therefore this undermines the existence of God. Or we have those who claim that these arguments are more or less in different ways, in revised forms of intelligent design or whatever, more successful than many give them credit for. And that is somehow what religion is about, and that is somehow what philosophy of religion is about. What I want to suggest, although I'm certainly not alone in suggesting this, is that is absolute nonsense. That what that misses is the very point of what religion is. Both sides in the debate, as I've characterised them, are ever more prone to treating religious faith as just a matter of correspondence to truth. We believe in these metaphysical statements, we don't, therefore that's what religion is. It seems almost as if theology as a proper discipline and religion as a meditation on life's finitude, things of that sort. Students here will know that my favourite word at the moment is finitude, so you'll hear it probably about 10 more times. That this way of thinking about religion is somehow driven out by this endless and simplistic account that it is or isn't based on the success or failure of certain arguments. In trying to articulate this, in trying to kind of get this across, I'm often drawn, when dealing with students particularly, or trying to work through this, to the work of someone whose anniversary is this year, Kierkegaard. And I'm going to give him a very rough paraphrasing, him being dead he won't mind. But Kierkegaard takes a view which is very hostile to the idea that religious faith is purely and predominantly a rational undertaking, which is to be defended or assailed via a series of propositional manoeuvres. He says, to paraphrase him roughly, that this is a mistake. Religion is not just one of these kind of things that you argue for or against. It's something much more, and this is why he's seen as the father of it, much more existential. So we see in Kierkegaard, in the aftermath of the European Enlightenment, the idea of the primacy of logic and reason, and that's begun to deeply permeate even religious institutions that it was used to criticise. And we seem to have a view developing that faith is the recourse of the ignorant and unthinking. We see that stereotype today, that faith is something easy. Idiots believe on the basis of faith. We're more reasonable. So this view develops that faith is recourse to the ignorant and unthinking, while the man or woman of thought, of reflection, accepts or rejects belief, including religious ones, on the basis of evidence for or against them. That is, they're a reasonable person, and that you only believe those things that you can believe. You have to require the fulfillment of an epistemic duty. You know what that means? In order to say that I believe this or I believe that, we have a duty to our beliefs to provide reasons why we have them. And so that's one way of looking at religious faith. But this seems to ignore key portions of it. If we accept this, however, as the ground rules for debating the veracity, the importance, the warrant, the basis of religious faith, we can see that it leads to the debate that we're so familiar with, and that so many of you are familiar with in class, the debate about proving or disproving claims of God's existence. Kierkegaard seems to have more sense. I think he's called the father of existentialism for a reason. And he starts with a view of religion as an engagement with existential realities. Religion is not about proof, it's about, for him, doubt, fear, uncertainty and despair. Sounds cheerful. I always want to contrast the religion of Kierkegaard with the idea of kind of fun church, people, or messy church, and all these kind of abominations of things at the moment. The idea that church is about fun and clapping and colouring in and things, when Kierkegaard seems to say church is about something that begins in aloneness, and it's going to finish you. How do I deal with the fact that I'm mortal and that everybody that I've ever known or cared about is heading with great speed for the grave? How do I deal with that despair? So that's where Kierkegaard begins, and he also wants to challenge the idea that being reasonable is the challenging intellectual position, wherefore the person of faith has it easy, being too lazy to think, as we characterise them. They just accept what they're told and believe in it. His view is that it's all very well going around only believing things you have evidence for, but that doesn't actually require any commitment from the thinker. If I only believe in things that I've got evidence for, then I don't need to commit to those beliefs. I assess whether or not to believe them on the basis of evidence. That's fine. He says, but actually basing your life, really believing something, basing your whole life and things that matter to you on something which you are not currently able to prove, which you actually might even believe to be unprovable, that's really demanding. That's really tough. That's the bigger task, the harder ask of the person, as it were. The leap of faith, as we characterise it now, we'll talk about him, that this demands, once we really appreciate how serious and life-changing it is, and the intellectual bravery even, that it requires, should make us reconsider the whole debate about the existence of God being something which you can prove. To him, this idea that we can prove or disprove the existence of God, and this somehow matters, is an entirely trivial view of religion. It reduces religion to something else that isn't religion. Religion is about taking a life-changing decision on the basis of not believing. Not being able to prove. And it seems a shame for so much energy to be expended, so much intellectual energy on these things which don't seem to matter. So for Kierkegaard, you can take your ontological, teleological, cosmological items home. They are, I think this is not a bad way of characterising them, they're intellectual playthings. They don't make any impact on my lived experience. No one's been convinced by them. No one's been unconvinced by them. They seem in the real, absolute reality of what religion is and how religion affects how I think about a natural disaster and how I meditate on human suffering, whether I do or don't have solidarity with people who suffer. The whole issue of whether or not I can play with some intellectual argument about the ontological nature of God and somehow derive a proof from that seems not only trivial and banal, but almost to insult the very nature of what it is to believe, or indeed to reject that belief on the basis of truly existential reality.